Thank you very much. First off, let me ask you, would it be interesting if you could de-risk a trial by going in and actually finding the patients before you even started, so you would really know if you're going to be able to accomplish your enrollment? And I don't mean looking at a heat map and saying, oh yeah, we might better find some sites around Atlanta, or doing an enhanced feasibility where you talk to both the study coordinator and the PI, and they say, yeah, thinking about this, we can enroll X number, per month. I'm going to talk to you about a different way that I think you can do this, that I think has the potential to change the way that we do clinical trials. Elligo is really about bringing healthcare and bringing research into healthcare, and thereby helping change the paradigm of clinical trials. Elligo does have some sites and site network that we have, but we also have access to a large number of patients that are within healthcare through their electronic medical records, and that includes, literally over 100 million patients, lots of physicians, and that is the sort of reach that I'm going to talk to you about. Through all of our sites and work that we've done, we have supported over 1,000 trials in the past year. But this has come about because of some industry challenges. I won't belabor this, but I want to use these as talking points to show how Elligo offers a solution to these. I think everyone in the pharma industry knows that when there's a delay to market, that results in the potential lost revenue. Dollar figures can vary. Okay. We also know that these delays can be caused by the fact that there are only a small population of patients that really get exposed and have a clear opportunity to get into clinical trials. 97% of physicians and patients don't participate in research. A lot of it is due with the infrastructure, the workflow, the impact upon their daily life, and what that might do to the relationships with their regular doctors. We know from research that about 85% of trials miss their timelines. How common is it to hear, yeah, we're a little slow on enrollment, okay? And patient recruitment is the #1 reason. The other thing that we'll talk about that I think Elligo offers a unique solution to is diversity. And so we'll talk about that and the equity issue, and this is something, of course, that the FDA has focused upon in the last couple of years quite a bit. So within the traditional site model, you've got this site, and they're, have advertising, and they're working to bring patients into the site. Okay? Sometimes they can call upon a database of previous research participants, and therefore you get kind of a recycling of patients that come through, right? How common is it if you're doing a major depressive disorder study, for example, that, oh yeah, they're going to look, okay, and they can, the exclusion criteria say you couldn't have participated in a trial in the last 6 months or whatever, but they're going to look at those patients that they've had to come through the trials in the past. Very different than looking at a completely kind of research naive population of folks. Now, Elligo's model uses kind of a decentralized or a hybrid approach where we would have a central PI with different sites or clinics that are seeing these patients who they act as the sub-Is. Okay? So they're maintaining that relationship with their patients. And Elligo helps support the infrastructure that's needed in order to run a clinical trial. And that it can do everything from coordinators, the SOPs, everything around that. Oftentimes, especially in some of the CNS neurology trials, raters. This is not a trivial issue. Okay? But this is the way that Elligo can come in and start to change this. And this is this idea of direct access to the known patients through really HIPAA-compliant, healthcare. If you have a system that can help you look into electronic medical records, first at a high level and then start honing it down to the right patients and then follow that up with clinical review as appropriate, you can really start gathering patients and keeping them in a warm virtual waiting room, for example, until it's time to enroll. Because it's rarely the case that there are no available patients with a particular indication. Sure, there are rare diseases. There are very rare diseases, right? But there are patients that have these diseases that are impacting their lives and their families' lives. The issue is trying to get access to them and make research reasonable and potentially enjoyable for them to actually go into the research. The traditional model is that you try to get all your sites going, you try and start up as many as possible, and then we all know what happens. A third of the sites hardly enroll anybody. A lot of them are zeros. 1/3 enroll about what they say they're going to enroll, at their PSV, your pre-site visit. And then 1/3 might overperform a little bit, okay? And then what do? If things are going south on your enrollment, you bring in more sites. You just start expanding, the top of the funnel there, okay? And that's how you start bringing the patients in. Well, Elligo suggests something different. You start that engagement early. You spend the time in kind of study engineering, using informatics, to really find these patients. You need to get the right diagnoses, query for the decreased kind of exclusionary diagnoses, and then engage their physicians to make sure that they can engage the patients and keep them enrolled. Because it's one thing to find someone to enroll, but then how many trials suffer from the other issue, and that's the early term problems, right? You have to not only identify and engage, but then keep them engaged along the way. If you could do that at the start, before the trial even starts enrolling, it allows you to start scaling as needed right from the start, before enrollment, to know how many sites, how many clinics do I need to have in order to enroll this. And then if you actually are able to get the subjects into a virtual waiting room, keeping them warm, all of a sudden, the enrollment can be very compressed, right? Because they're already interested in the study. The doctor's already spoken to them. They're sitting there just waiting. And then you enroll them. This allows you kind of a new way to do this, okay? Now, you have to not only have access to a large enough network of electronic medical records, but you also have to have the right kind of technology platforms to conduct these trials. Right? And Elligo has developed the relationships with some very large networks, Cerner, Harris, Ascension, for example, and has the kind of their own network, Research Connect, and an ability to search this and connect with these patients. And I'll tell you about some of the other ways that you can connect and actually keep connected to these patients as well. Then we'll talk about the diversity issue a little bit more in just a minute, because if you think about proportionality in healthcare, you want to be able to look at the not only the one, you want to make sure that you have a representative sample that matches the characteristics of the United States demographics and those that the prevalence and incidence of that disease. Okay? Natural health care does that, again, naturally. They're not coming into clinical trials, but that's exactly who goes in to see their docs. And if you start tapping into that healthcare system for clinical research, all of a sudden, equity issues start becoming less of a problem. And then we'll give you some data and some evidence. I mean, in just a little bit. So we call this a patient select trial. And that's because, it's really utilizing this patient first. Like I said, there's no lack of patients with major depressive disorder. And I'll throw out a lot of CNS terms because my background is as a clinical psychologist. Okay, but Elligo is not limited to CNS, neurology, or anything like that. We do work in all different therapeutic areas. Okay, like I said, if you have an MDD trial that's not enrolling, it's not because MDD has magically been cured throughout the world, right? It's because somehow you're not accessing patients with that MDD, occasionally there are some interesting protocols that come out there as well. I won't, say that there aren't. But, and you have to know the patients, and then you have to be able to get access to them and create a trial-ready site, for example. This kind of refinement through the informatics, like I said, is a way to reduce your risk right at the start. And here's a little more of a detailed example of what I'm talking about. I've already talked about the system-wide electronic medical record search. You identify then those practices, hospitals, clinics that have the best practices and sufficient high number of high-quality patients, okay, that meet the protocol requirements. Then you engage with the physicians who have these patients. They may or may not have ever done clinical research, right? Now, some of them are going to be interested. Maybe they haven't done it, since, back when they were doing their postdoc or something. But they'll often say, well, yeah, but I don't know if I have the time. It's really hard. It's a big hassle to do that. And, is it worth it? Okay? It's not that they're not interested in science and research and even finding something new to help patients get over disease states. It's just some of these practical considerations. Elligo is there to engage with them. You select them along, with they'll have the right patient mix, and then you support them and see what areas that they need support. Okay? Then that combined with having a central PI that offers the oversight and guidance, with the clinic physician being the sub-I, for example, it offers a wonderful way to kind of bring research into healthcare. And that's at the physician side. So then let's think about the patients and the patient journey for a second. So if your physician is interested in a particular study and thinks it might be a good idea, something hasn't been working. Of course, it's not ethical to change something that's working fine to test a study drug, right? But they're the ones who are going to know, who might benefit from this. If you have the physician involved in inviting these patients to consider enrollment, we know that actually patients are much more likely to listen. Patients that won't respond to a Facebook ad, that are not going to see this or respond to any other sort of advertising. But if they're talking to their doc about this, this could really be something useful for me, right? So you keep that trusted relationship, that dyad, or in some instances, a triad, pediatrics, some of the gerontological studies, Alzheimer's, where you actually have to have an informed caregiver, okay? But you keep the relationship there and then potentially invite them into the study. And through using technology that is a part of Elligo Health, we'll call it Root, and I'll show you some slides on that in a minute. You can actually engage the patient early and get them into this virtual waiting room, okay? And then you can populate the virtual waiting room, again, and it somewhat does depend upon the study design. Some studies, we all know, and so I'm just using this as an example, require you to go in quickly, right? If it's a new incidence of disease. You can think of stroke, trauma, whatever. Okay, but let's just, in general, this is an option here. You can wait until you have a certain population, number of folks that are in there, and then get the site activated and go forward. And if you were unable to reach that number, you could stop it and limit the exposure. That's a way to help de-risk a trial. And you can launch the study really with all of the patients, vetted and ready for screening, and they're warm, they're already interested. So you're not having people coming off the street. I mean, we have whole industries that look for professional patients, okay? But these are the patients with that doc that have been with that doc oftentimes for years and years, okay? And so you're getting, patients that are not out there just looking for clinical trials, to get engaged in. And then you have to go through all the same, screening and baseline and so forth. But this is that patient select adaptive engagement model. You can see here we use both Research Connect, which is one of our, it's a healthcare data platform that allows us to search. And then Intelligo Research Stack is really like a CTMS. Okay? It's a way to kind of track and monitor what's happening. This is something that is certainly flexible, and we're not saying that it has to be this, because we can work with anything from a metadata to a clinical inc, whatever is kind of needed for that particular trial. But this is something that we have used and actually works. And this is a little bit of a braggy slide, but Elligo does have the largest known patient access network. I mentioned Cerner, Harris, Ascension, Walmart Canada, and Jack Nathan Health, okay, that allow us to search. And again, not just in the sense of like a heat map that shows you clusters based upon claims data or something like that, but these are actual, this is their full-on medical records, okay, that, again, fully HIPAA compliant, because Elligo, just so it's clear, we're not a CRO. Think of us really like a site, okay? And it allows Elligo and that physician to do the in-depth review of that chart to know who really are the best patients for the study. Then I told you about Root, and it says here it's a digital study buddy like Alexa or Siri for participants, but this is the way that once you identify patients and you want to engage them, you can connect them with Root. And you can see it scrolling there. It's kind of a chat bot, but it can also do surveys, links, some consents, scheduling, reminders, and so forth. It's a way to keep the patients engaged, keep them warm. For sure, during that virtual waiting room, should that apply to a particular protocol, but even further on throughout the study. Okay. We already know that for patients that are with their doc, and let's just say their primary care doc, they're less likely to just not show up than if you're at a professional site. Okay? And so you have a decreased ETs, early terms. Root is another way to just keep them in the loop and engaged. And I've mentioned this virtual waiting room idea where you can get the patients ready and have them ready to go literally for a quick enrollment. We've currently done 31,000 plus potential patients. It's been going on. I wouldn't say you want them in a virtual waiting room for 14 months, but we've been using it. Okay, Elligo is a scale-up company. We're not a startup anymore because we're bigger than that. And I'll show you some of the trials that we've done this on. But we've had this in place for a while, so it's not like it's completely untested. Okay. And we know that it's a way that can help you keep them engaged and enroll quickly once Elligo and the sponsor decide, yes, we're ready. These patients are ready to go. Start that site up, boom, get them enrolled. Again, should the protocol warrant that? These protocols are all different. I told you I'd go back to the diversity issue. And this is information from the FDA's 2020 drug trial snapshots. So if you haven't seen that before, basically they take all of the drugs that were approved in 2020 and they'll kind of map it out and let you know kind of the race and ethnicity for these. And you can see on the slide there that the 2020 clinical trial population, and again, this is for every single approved drug in 2020, easily available through the FDA website. 75% were white Caucasian, 11% were Hispanic Latino, 8% were Black or African American alone. Okay. Now, the population of the US at or around that same time, you can see there it's 64% white Caucasian, 18.7% Hispanic Latino ethnicity, and 12.4% on Black or African American alone. Because if you remember when you did your census, I mean, they've got like, you can have up to like 6 different races now, and so it gets very complicated. I tried to just simplify it a little bit here. So any time that your trial, you know, the proportionality is significantly different than the population, you want to take a look at that. And we know from the 2020 drug trial snapshots that guess what? There was disproportionality, meaning fewer percentage of Hispanic, Latinos, and Black African Americans alone. And if you then go in and look at some of these individual trials, there are some that are strikingly disproportional. Okay? And in 2020, the majority of the drugs that actually were approved tended to be onc and hematology, just to put that out there. Okay? But that there's you know, a number of drugs. I think it's like 43, something like that. I'm just going from memory on that one. Okay. So Elligo, by going into healthcare, has a unique opportunity to help choose the sites and the networks that are rich in diversity. We know from the work that we've already done, 31% of enrollment of our enrolled subjects are diverse, meaning that they're Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American. Okay, and so you can see there, you know, 26% of Elligo, you know, participants, and we think that's because of not only being able to be thoughtful about choosing the sites and locations, but also about making sure that they can stay with their doctor, right? And typically, for example, Laguna Research, what you see is that, and this is an area that's very kind of Hispanic, Latino, South Texas, and guess what? It wouldn't surprise you to know that their docs are primarily the Hispanic or Latino origin, right? So you have a diversity in the sub-I within our model as well. And we've had great success there in being able to bring in a rich and diverse population. Okay, so then the question you might have is, okay, well, what have you done? Okay, and so here's an example of some studies that we've done. You know, enrolled 3,000 in 3 months, 25 sites, up to 600, 10 weeks, 2 sites, 120, 3 weeks, 2 sites, 102, 6 weeks, 2 sites, and you can see that. You know, now we've got, I think it's actually 11 now, patient select trials are either in process or completed, and these range in terms of their therapeutic indication from CNS to diagnostic to gen med, some vaccine, a couple of these lower ones down here, some vaccine trials, okay? And so it's a wide range. But my point is that we believe that this model can help change the way people do clinical research and reach the patients where they live and keep them with their doctors to facilitate enrollment and keep them sustained in the studies throughout. So that's all that I have, and so I'll open it up to any questions. And thank you for staying, by the way, for those of you that are here. I know it's the last talk of the day, so.
Yes, but it's not the end of the day. So.
Yeah,
Oh,
please.
here, we'll do this so the virtual people can hear you.
The concept is really interesting. What's the process with the patient consent and how you access their data initially?
Okay, Okay, so you're wondering, I mean, how are we accessing their data if they haven't given their consent? So
Correct.
within these healthcare networks, we initially look at de-identified data, and then we hone in and work with the healthcare organizations that have collaborative practice agreements, and we actually do have permission. Yeah. So I mean, no, we're not skirting any laws here. No, but it is the right question. So thank you. Yeah.